My name's Marianne Cantwell, and I was asked here by Robert and Liz because I've just written a book called Be a Free Range Human, and that book is essentially about how to take the idea of a career break and make it into your permanent lifestyle. So what would you do if this wasn't about taking 3 months off or a year off? It was actually about creating a life where you could live anywhere, do what you loved, and essentially get paid to have that life. So what I'm going to talk about for the next couple of minutes is what this means, what it means to be a free-range human, how I made the journey from corporate cage employee to full-time free-ranger, and a little bit about the assumptions that hold us back from taking the plunge into this life. Then I'm going to quickly open out and make most of tonight an opportunity to actually discuss how does this lifestyle work? Like, how do you run a business from the road? What could you do if you could do anything? And ask anything that you'd like about how to do this for yourself. So I'd rather keep it interactive for you tonight. So I think the first thing that I'd like to sort of start with here is the idea that we essentially have to have a job in order to get paid, or we have to have a business that is based in one place. And the thing that struck me when I was starting out in my professional life was that it was kind of felt like it was the end of an era. It was like it was the end of the time that I was allowed to go out and have adventures and travel and be alive. And I think that's what we're taught to do from the time we go through school. So we go through school with the aim of getting the grades to get to the university so we'll get the job. And then from then on, we'll get the payoff. But I am not sure that people actually ask themselves, do we want the payoff of being in that office, of working all that time to live for the vacations where you can do the short trips and save up so you can do that career break, then go in and do it all again. So what I found before I started thinking like this was that I was a career break addict. And that's my whole journey started out with a series of career breaks. So my very first career break actually started before I got my first job, which is a good sign of things to come, I think. And what happened was I was living in Australia, where I'm from, and I was supposed to go and do a PhD. So I thought, well, I'll take a few months out and go travel to Europe, big faraway Europe, go to London and take a career break. So quite a few years later, I'm still here. So clearly that career break was decade plus long. And what happened was, in that time, I reevaluated what I was doing with my life. Now, has anyone here done the career break? Yeah? Has anyone found it was a time for reevaluation and you came back and you were kind of like, what the hell? That was my very first one when I was young. So I thought, that's it. I know what I want to do. I want to work for a big corporate media company. That was always going to work out as well. So I did that. I went in, I worked for Sony Records, I worked for Disney, I built a career in media, except the whole time I was dreaming of the next career break. So I was the one in the cubicle with all the photos up of the places I wanted to visit. I always had a Google page up of, my next vacation. What could I do next? What adventures could I have? Not unpredictably, I decided I couldn't stand it after a few years. Quit my job and immediately took a career break. So I then career braked and traveled to Asia, back to Australia for a while, and thought, that's it. Reevaluating my life, I'm going to become a management consultant because that's going to solve my problems. So I did that. I went in, decided I was going to do that, got a job in the city, went up to director level, did really well, whole time dreaming of the next career break. And I was considering it. I thought, I'm going to quit my job, travel more. And I just thought, how much longer am I going to continue in this cycle? Am I going to continue forever going, I'm going to live for the next vacation or the next career break? And that's when I really reevaluated things for myself. I took some time to myself in working the 18-hour days. I still found time to really think about what I wanted. I started learning about my personality. I started learning about what it would take to start something for myself. And I launched myself on the side into a totally different field to what I'd been working in, built things up, and then in the middle of a giant recession, quit my job, smart move, and set up my own business. And I decided at that point that I would make that business location independent. So I didn't want an office. I didn't want to be tied down anywhere. And I wanted to be able to run it from anywhere in the world. And that's what I do today. So that became my permanent career break. And from there, I've essentially created what I called a free-range career. So in the last year alone, I've run my business out of, I think, 7 countries. My laptop, which is usually with me, but I left it at home today, is about that big. That contains my entire business. The rest of my business is on my iPhone. Unfortunately, Apple is not sponsoring this. I wish they would, because I have everything Apple. My whole business fits in a backpack, and that's how I live my life, and that's a conscious choice that I made. In terms of the outcome of it, it essentially means that it gets you, when you explore that lifestyle and you start getting into that world, what you realize is there's an entire community of people who are not better qualified than you, not better, connected than you, but who have made certain decisions and discoveries about how we in 2012 and 2013 are able to make a consistent income without an office and without a boss. Personally, I now earn more than I did in my very good, office job as a management consultant, and that's the same pattern that I've seen for people who do this smartly. So the Be a Free-Range Human book is actually about that whole process. It's about how do you go from someone who's in a job, not too sure what you really want to do with your life, except you quite like another career break, to discovering that, to setting it up, and then doing things so you have a consistent income and you're not struggling, every month as a sort of a half-broke freelancer. How do you have that freedom and how do you do it? So I'm going to open up for questions in just a sec. But before I do, I just want to give the general idea of the free-range philosophy, because I'm not a huge believer in the idea that if you hear a how-to, then everything will be solved. I think we have a lot of barriers that are created, throughout our training from school to university, if you went to university, or to jobs, that tell us that we have to wait for someone to give us permission, that we have to wait to be picked, that we have to have other people having done something before us. And I think that when I've worked with clients through this process, the biggest shifts I've seen have not been when there's been a nugget of knowledge given, though those things are important, and my book is full of that stuff towards the end, but the biggest shifts happen when you actually realize you can create your own rules. And my book actually opens with a Steve Jobs quote that I found and buried in the middle of a speech one day, and it goes something like, the moment that you realize that all the rules in the world were made up by someone who is no smarter than you, that's when things change. So that's what I'd like to sort of kick this all off with as we open out for questions about how to do this for yourself.
I was just going to ask what your business is.
I've been through a few different versions. So when I quit my job, the first thing that I did was I set up in marketing consulting, because that background was in management consulting and marketing. So I went in and I did what a lot of people do when they first go freelance, and that is I essentially used the experience I'd built up to segue my way into what I really wanted to do. So that was my first thing. That got me off the ground for the first year. It went really well. But then I made a decision to segue into what I thought I really wanted to do, which was career coaching. So I helped people with interviews and CVs and all that sort of thing. After a while, I realized I hated jobs, and I was helping people get other jobs, and that didn't really sit well with me. And by that stage, people had been asking me for a while, how did you quit your job? How did you build a business? So I started a blog for free. It was on blogger.com. That blog was called Free Range Humans. It was a side project, and the interest in that blog was bigger than anything else I'd done. So I now do Free Range Humans full time. The reason I give a long answer, by the way, is I think people sometimes, we get the impression, again, it's the training we have through our schooling, that we have to know the answer straight away. Usually people who go free range do something else to start with before discovering their thing.
How did it feel to sort of step out of the safety net into the risk of going it alone?
I love that question. How does it feel stepping out of the safety net into the risk of going it alone? 2 parts to answer that. Firstly, mildly terrifying. And the reason I say that is I'm a bit of a control freak. I mean, I'm a complete control freak. So clearly I thought I had everything mapped out. I was like, I'm starting my business on the side. I'm going to build up to this level. I managed to negotiate my way into part-time working. And the week before I was going to go part-time from a very demanding full-time job, I snapped and quit my job. So I wasn't ready. So all the plans in the world went, and that's when the financial crash happened. So it was scary. That was the first answer. But the other answer is what I realized by looking at what was happening around me at the time, in the world. People were losing their jobs, redundancies were arriving. My offices was behind Lehman Brothers, so a few weeks before I quit my job, I watched everything collapse. And that was one of the things that led me to resign. Ironically, everyone was struggling to hold on to a job. I just thought, these people, I was working till midnight. Whatever we might think of the bankers, I was watching them work till midnight until they were kicked out. With nowhere to go. The admin staff kicked out, nowhere to go. And I just thought, why am I doing this? What is this security that I've been told I have in a job if I can lose it? And people who I've been watching for weeks can lose it like this. So what I'd say is I don't think any option is secure anymore. And although it might feel like when you have big, shiny office buildings and an international brand name that you have security, I'd ask you, what's your notice period right now? Because that's how much security you have. And the thing I get my clients to do is a little mental exercise where if you're in a job and you're thinking, well, I can't leave because of security, I say, what if you didn't call it a job? Just for the next week, just say, I am self-employed with one client, and that client is my boss. That client can fire me at 3 months, 6 months notice. Any business expert will tell you that is a precarious position to be in, and I don't believe anymore that jobs are secure. Right now, I'd say neither option's secure, but I'd rather have the ability to create my own income, to have multiple sources of income, and to be able to dance with the changes and make my business adapt, rather than having one person or organisation able to determine if I make a living anymore. Jenny's just asking, what if someone wants to create a portfolio career where they do more than one thing and get paid for it? It's one of my favourite topics. Have you read the book by Barry Hobson and Katie Ledger? It's called And What Do You Do? And it's about creating a portfolio career. Barry's a friend of mine. He's amazing. And you don't have one main source of income. You can do things as varied as, dog walking to international yacht consulting and get paid for it. And the thing I'd say in terms of advice, if you were not yet doing any of those things and getting paid for it, the general advice that Barry and I tend to give is that it's better to start with one or two of them as your main focus and feed the others in on the side. When I quit my job and started out my first business, it wasn't just doing marketing consulting. I actually started 3 different things. One of them was a cupcake company that I did. And in that time, what I found was I discovered what I wanted to do and what worked because I had 3 different income streams. Now, I actually have a chapter in the book on portfolio careers with some examples. But generally, the advice is decide what you want to do, realize you can do a few things, and decide which of them suits your needs the most now. So your need might be, I need income. So what's your quick win on that? What's the one strand that's best? You might also say, yeah, I need income, but I want the variety of something creative. What is the second strand you can add in that's something creative or that's something people-based or whatever it is? Add that in and have the others on the back burner as side projects that you develop as well. And then see what suits you. Some people run with an 8-strand portfolio career or more. Some people, like me, work better when we have maybe 3 strands, or at the moment, I'm doing one thing because I'm totally passionate about it. So right now, I work really ridiculous hours because I'm launching a book. So, I'm working. I don't know if I have conversations that don't involve books in the last 2 weeks. But having said that, what does my normal week look like? Well, it will I work intensely. So the way I tell people is understand your personality. If I tried to work at a steady pace every day, like you're meant to in a job, I'm really inefficient and I don't get anything done. What I work on is bursts of inspiration. So the first thing I do when you're free range is you realize there is no prize for showing up every day. If you're not being productive, you're not getting anything from sitting at that computer telling you to work. So what I do is I work incredibly intensely over the period of time in which I'm working. So I might be launching something, have an idea, I'll launch it within a week. I always go really, really fast. But then after maybe a week's of intense working, week and a half, I'll be done, and I'll take 4 days off. And that's my style. I have another free-range colleague who thinks that's crazy and could never do that. And she works very steadily, set hours a day. She works like half the day every week, takes some Fridays off, and she's happy with that. So I think the best answer is work out what you want. And the other part of your question was about travel, which is a great question. How does that work? How do you see things? I think that when you are a full-time traveller, you make different decisions than you would if you were somewhere on holiday. So I tend to pick a destination. So one of my favourite work spots is Bali. Ubud in Bali. I was there for it was awesome. I was there for 2 months this year, actually, like just before I came back to London. And I've been there, I wrote part of the book there, I was there last year as well, and I know a particular part of Ubud, and to me that's like a second home. I know it so well. I know all the vegan cafes that I hang out in very happily. So I go there to get work done, and I find that I need a week to settle somewhere, because just to get used to how it feels to wake up in the morning. So in that week, I won't launch anything. I'll still have calls if I have clients or anything, but I won't start anything. After that, I settle, and I try to settle for a month plus, because that's how long it takes me to be back in work mode. Then what I'll tend to do is, after a month of super intense working, I'll take off. And I'll be like, so last year I did it. I stayed in Bali for, I think it was 2 months, and then I went to Cambodia and Laos and Hong Kong, I think. Somewhere else I went. And in that time, I was more maintaining my business. So my VA, my virtual assistant, who is awesome, she kind of took care of most of it. And so I was still making an income from my downloadable courses, but I was essentially mostly offline. And that's what I do. I work in a burst. Like I was in Tuscany writing the book and running some courses. I worked there really intensely for a month. And then I was like, took off to other bits of Italy, came back, did it again. That's my personal solution, finding that base and going off on trips to how do you work without being like, but there's something shiny and new in town, I must see it. It's like, well, what would you do if you were in your home destination? How would you run it? And how would you run your life? So the trends at the moment are definitely running an online-based business, and that could be anything from, selling something that ships from elsewhere, or much more smartly, the idea I think works really well right now, is looking at how you can take a service that would normally be provided in a face-to-face, location-dependent setting, and working out how to increase your audience to a global scale by putting it online and delivering it only virtually. From there, you can then take that service, take that thing you help people with, and if you choose to, if you want even more location independence, create products to help people do it for themselves. So an example could be, if you're a personal stylist, or you want to be a personal stylist, how could you make that free range? So you do the exercise and you'd be like, well, the thing I don't want is to be doing face-to-face consultations. So how can I do that? Well, I could, making this up, I could look at a niche of people who are busy, who don't actually like shopping, whatever, who prefer Skype consultations. I could turn that into an advantage. I could brand myself as that person who is available in this way. I could do it that way. Then that person could do that, do it for a while, and be like, actually, I won't be able to take off to somewhere random for a while without having to do these consults. So what I'll do is I'll take the most asked questions by my niche, and I'll put it into an e-guide that is downloadable to supplement my income as well as doing these consultations. And that's how free-range businesses are formed. I think they're formed from noticing what you want to do and where you want to do it, and creating your environment that makes that work. And right now, I think that things are really big. I'm definitely helping people out with something that has been bothering them, something that, they could read a book about perhaps, but they might want some more personal help with, rather than going down the selling something physical route. For various reasons, including the rise of e-retailers, Amazon, where you're getting undercut for physical products, I personally think you have an easier time and a better time selling information and support. But that's not to say don't do the other things. I just think that's a slightly easier route at the moment. In short, I don't really believe in a saturated market. I think that people buy from an individual or a business that they want to buy from. So the way I look at it is, how can you put yourself out there so that you are the only person that someone wants to engage with on this topic? And just an example of that, I was in Bangkok about a month ago, and I ran into someone at a sort of conference event who was saying, I want to get out of the field I'm working in. She was working in these sort of info product field. She's like, my field's saturated. My field is, I can't compete. My people won't pay. And the person next to her said, that's funny because they're paying me pretty regularly. And it really, that conversation struck me because it was true. And it made me realize that it isn't about how saturated the field is. It doesn't matter if you're saturated if you're the one that's getting paid. So the stuff that I get you to do is really to look at how do you stand out from the crowd. And the biggest tip I give, so a little tidbit of it, is the first thing you start with shouldn't be the crowd. If you look at the competition, you will be one of the competition. If you look at who you are, how you want to stand out, and what your customers actually want, and forget the crowd, you're in a much better position than everyone else who spends their time browsing competitor websites and tries to be 1% different. So I don't believe in spending much on your business, if anything. I think my dad was, an accountant running his own business, quite different to free rangers. But the one thing he told me is that your business should pay you from day one. I don't believe in startups. I don't believe in sinking money in. I don't believe that there's any benefit except for the kudos of maybe your peers in having a whole bevy of employees. So what I chose in the end, I started out with no one working for me at all. It was just me. And when I started realizing that I was not launching projects because I was afraid of the workload or because I was overwhelmed, that's when I took on my virtual assistant, who was actually a client of mine, who I trained up to work for me exclusively, and now she does this with other people as well. And she did the stuff that I couldn't stand doing and that she loves doing. So that's a really interesting idea, that once you get off the ground, you'll find the things that bore you to tears, like I can't do admin to save my life. I forget everything. Someone else will love it. So my assistant likes organizing her sock drawer by color. So I'm like, you are so perfect for me. And so she does that stuff. And she helps me find other people. I did my own website. I'm not a techie, but I learned how to use WordPress to a point that I could create a really good website functioning. I only hired my first web designer, another one of my clients. I seem to only hire my clients. Another one of my clients for the book. So the book website, beafreerangehuman.com, was created by Gemma, who's an awesome client of mine. I hired her. She's the first web designer. I've been doing this for years. So my idea is you don't need to hire people except when the cost of not hiring them is higher than the cost of hiring them. I'm really into understanding what is the most efficient way of getting the results that you want. And the difference I have from Tim is I actually say, what's the most efficient way of getting the life that you want? So I don't really care if for example, I love designing stuff. I love going into like a design program, making a picture and having text all over it. I love that stuff. And that's totally inefficient, right? But I enjoy it. So the payoff for me is enjoyment. I'm very honest about, doing things I enjoy for the sake of it. So the 80-20 rule I use of going, what is something that feels like work that you don't want to do? How can you cut that down so you're only doing stuff you love, and the stuff you don't like doing that you have to, you minimize it so you're just getting maximum results from it. And when you start thinking about the world in terms of, why am I doing that? Why do I have to, create that thing? Is it because people have told me to, or because I get results? You free up a lot of time and headspace for yourself to actually create the life that you want to create.
How do you make the work-social balance?
I think it's a slight different approach, I think, when you've really created a free-range life, where you're doing things that you love doing. But the people that you hang out with a lot are the people in your field, are the people living your life. So things change a little bit. I don't have that much of a barrier between things that I love doing and things I get paid for. So what I tend to do is, if I really want to do something, I work out a way of integrating it into my business in some way. So in that sense, it's blurred. But where things are very clear for me is when I'm in social mode. I don't talk to my friends about this stuff. I don't, go out to the pub and suddenly start consulting someone. I don't coach my friends. And to me, that barrier is really important because what you don't want is to feel like you're working full time. You want to be making conscious choices, right, about what you're doing. So Well, I think that the way I'd say it is in your first 6 months of when you get started, it's going to be a bit tricky to have a work-social balance that is perhaps the way you'd want it to be. So I always tell people, be really honest with this. You're going to work your butt off for 6 months to get this off the ground. And that's generally what happens. After that, I encourage you, and something I had to do was take a step back and go, is this the life that you gave that stuff up to create? If it's not, if you find that you're working and it's just another job that you've created for yourself, that's when you step back, and that's when you go, I'm now my own boss. I can't blame anyone else for this. What do I do now? So I'd say it's a series of conscious choices, but it's not so much, I think the reason I started out with that answer is it's not so much about, well, I only want to work 6 hours or 4 hours. I just don't think that's the game that we're in. If you love what you do, it's not about the hours, it's about the conscious choice about what you do and when you do it.
2 random and unrelated questions, but do you maintain kind of a home base anywhere? Also, kind of one of the things that I've enjoyed about working, much as I would like to be my own boss, is just the camaraderie that you have of working with other people. So how have you found it to be almost totally, independent?
Firstly, looking at, do I have my own home base? I've been through a few iterations of this. So when I first started out, I sort of had a home base, and then I found that I kept coming back to London when I didn't really want to, because there was a default, because I had a home, because my stuff was here. So I like to make things tough for myself sometimes. So I quit my home and I put all my stuff into storage. And I did that not because I had to, because I found I was in that really dangerous spot where you're just too comfortable, but you're not loving it. And I think that's more dangerous than being unhappy, because when you're unhappy, you'll make a change. When you're too comfortable and not loving it, you can stay mired and average for years. So I just was like, I'm doing it, put my stuff in storage, and I went and traveled. And that was a really awesome thing for me to do, because I'm a real nester. I love having a home base. So that was a huge exploration for me. What that allowed me to do was realize that London wasn't the place that I wanted to spend my full time ever. And that was a big discovery, that maybe it won't be somewhere I want to settle forever either, but that there's a huge value in coming back, and I do enjoy being here. So now I do have a home base. I live with my partner, really close to here actually, and we have a space that we rent out, and when we go traveling as well. So now I've gone back, I've put my stuff out of storage, got that going. And with websites like Airbnb.com, if you guys use Airbnb, awesome for career breakers and awesome for full-time nomads. If you do have a home base, you can rent out your space. And essentially, if you go to somewhere in a country that costs less to live in, you can fund a lot of your travels, like your living in that country, from the rental of your home. If you don't have a home base, awesome, you don't have a problem. So I've done that as well. I don't find either option less stressful than the other. For me, I found they were pretty equal. If one of them you're getting an income from your home, the other one you don't have to worry about your home. So they're both fine. And nomads do things in lots of ways. I have one nomadic friend who bought a flat in Buenos Aires because she realized that she could buy something better there than she ever could in the US, where she's from. I have other nomads who are lifelong minimalists and wouldn't dream of owning more than a backpack. But it's really about deciding what works for you. So try it out. I'd say people go on that 6-month break, try out both versions, see which one you're comfortable with. When you're in this space, especially if you're doing it traveling, I think that's where it gets fun. You meet more people than you expect. So I actually meet more people on the road than I do in London, because you know what it's like, guys. You've all been traveling. And that actually gets bigger and bigger when you start running your business from the road. So there are more and more communities out there at the moment. So I've got Free Range sort of Facebook fan page at the moment. And on there, you see people sort of hooking up to do different things. You have a whole bunch of other groups that are running that you can sort of tap into and say, if I'm going to another country, I'll be like, hey, who's here at the moment? And people will be like, I'm here. And I make friends that I see again and again around the world. So to me, the place I've had the most sort of feeling of not having camaraderie has actually been in London, because when you've been working in one place and you go self-employed, suddenly your default has changed, but you haven't changed your environment, so things are different. So actually, I think it's easier to go traveling and have camaraderie, and you have to work harder in your hometown. So if you want to check out book stuff, it's beafreerangehuman.com. Feel free to laugh at the trailer. I filmed it in 3 different cities around the world, and it involves me on the edge of a cliff. And the book comes out early January, and I'd really love people's help sort of getting this known simply by buying it, helping it rise up the rankings, and getting other people to notice it as well. So check out the website. Thanks, everyone.